Imagine creating a single invention so revolutionary that, 100 years after your death, it would still be in service with armies all around the world. Now imagine doing that not once, but many times over a single lifetime. It sounds impossible. Yet this man truly existed. His name was John Moses Browning, and his story is one of the most extraordinary in all of engineering. He was the humble son of a gunsmith, born in a small, dusty town in the American West. And despite having very little formal education, he became the greatest firearms designer in all of history. Over his lifetime, John Browning was granted more than 120 patents, a number that still astonishes engineers around the world today. His ideas revolutionized pistols, rifles, shotguns, and machine guns, and shaped the work of nearly every generation of designers who came after him. This is the story of one of the most brilliant minds in mechanical engineering of the 19th and early 20th centuries. It all begins on January 23, 1855, in the small town of Ogden, in the territory of Utah. In that era, the United States was still living through its great westward expansion. It was a land of farmers, hunters, explorers, and pioneers, where a reliable tool could often mean the difference between life and death. John's father, Jonathan Browning, was a respected gunsmith and one of the many pioneers who crossed the country in search of a new life. His workshop was far more than a simple place of work. It was a true laboratory, where tools were created, repaired, and improved for the people of the entire region. It was in this environment that young John grew up. While the other children played in the dirt streets, he spent hours watching gears, springs, and pieces of metal. The boy was completely fascinated by how machines worked, by whatever made each part fit together and move with precision. It is said that, even as a small child, he would take apart any object that fell into his hands, just to discover how it worked on the inside. And after understanding every detail, he would put it all back together again, piece by piece. That tireless curiosity would become the defining mark of his entire life. Still in his teens, Browning already handled tools that many experienced adults could not master. At just 13 years of age, inside his father's workshop, he built his first functional mechanism, assembled from loose parts and forgotten scrap. It was the first clear sign of a truly extraordinary talent. But what truly impressed people was not his ability to build. It was his obsession with making things better. Where others saw something finished and complete, John saw flaws and new possibilities. And he always asked the same question, repeated like a mantra: how can I make this work better? While many gunsmiths of the time simply copied old models, Browning took exactly the opposite path. He invented entirely new mechanisms, solutions no one had even imagined before. His mind worked like that of a true modern engineer, decades ahead of his own time. In 1879, just over 20 years old, he registered his very first patent, a single-shot rifle, simple and ingenious. It was only the beginning of a long journey. In the years that followed, large companies began to realize that this young man from rural Utah possessed a truly rare gift. The first giant to notice his talent was Winchester, one of the largest firearms manufacturers in the country. Impressed by his designs, the company bought several of Browning's patents. It was the start of a partnership that would last for many years and produce some of the most famous rifles of that entire period. The rifles based on his designs quickly earned a reputation for absolute reliability. They endured dust, bitter cold, and heavy mud, and still kept working exactly when they were needed most. In the American West of that time, that kind of dependability was worth its weight in gold. Before long, the Browning name was known throughout the country, becoming a symbol of quality and ingenuity. But even at the height of his success with manual rifles, John sensed that there was something far greater on the horizon, waiting patiently to be discovered. He believed, with total conviction, that the future lay in automatic mechanisms, capable of operating by harnessing the very energy released with each shot. To most people of that era, it sounded like pure fantasy. But to Browning, it was simply the next great problem to be solved. And so his true revolution began. One after another came new shotguns, new rifles, pistols, and, finally, the machine guns. Each new design was more efficient, simpler, and more ingenious than the last. It was as if that brilliant mind simply never ran out of ideas. One of his most remarkable creations was a semi-automatic shotgun, introduced around the year 1900. It is considered the first of its kind to achieve real success around the world. The design was so good and so far ahead of its time that it continued to be produced for decades, in factories across many different countries. But perhaps his most legendary work is the pistol known as the Colt 1911. Officially adopted by the Armed Forces of the United States, it remained the standard sidearm of the American Army for more than 70 years. Very few weapons in all of history have had such a long and influential career. Another creation of enormous importance was the automatic rifle known by the initials BAR. It was introduced in the final years of the First World War, giving soldiers a volume of firepower that, until that moment, was very rare on the battlefield, and it would influence military tactics for many decades. Yet none of his creations achieved as much fame as the .50 caliber machine gun, known worldwide as the Browning M2. Designed at the very start of the 1920s, it became a true symbol of ruggedness, resistance, and durability all around the planet. What is most astonishing is that, decades after it was created, that very same machine gun remains in service in dozens of countries around the world. Very few pieces of military equipment stay relevant for so long, surviving wars, technologies, and entire generations without ever being replaced. Many people imagine that Browning owned enormous factories, with thousands of workers laboring under his command. But the truth is quite different. His real talent was never in producing, but in creating. He was, above all else, a passionate inventor. His process was almost artisanal. He designed each mechanism, built the prototypes with his own hands, and registered the patents. Then he licensed those designs to great manufacturers such as Winchester, Colt, and the Belgian Fabrique Nationale, who handled all of the large-scale production. In every one of his projects, his obsession was always the same: to make the mechanism simpler, stronger, and more reliable. He believed, deep in his heart, that true genius lay not in making things complicated, but in making them simple, in doing the most with the fewest possible parts. That philosophy of work influenced entire generations of designers who came long after him. To this very day, much of the fundamental principles used in mechanical engineering were born, or deeply refined, from the ideas of that gunsmith's son from Utah. In November of 1926, already 71 years old, John Browning was in Belgium, working at the Fabrique Nationale factory alongside his own son. Despite his advanced age and a lifetime full of achievements, he simply could not stop creating. It was there, during a technical meeting, while examining a new mechanism at his workbench, that he suffered a heart attack. John Moses Browning died on the spot, doing exactly what he had loved most his entire life: inventing. Very few men remain so productive until their very last moment. What few people know is that his final great project, an advanced pistol, was still unfinished when he passed away. The work was later completed by a longtime collaborator, and that weapon would become yet another worldwide success. In a way, Browning's ideas lived on, even after his death. John Moses Browning was not merely an inventor of weapons. He was one of the greatest mechanical engineers who ever lived. His legacy reaches far beyond the military world, and it teaches us a powerful lesson: that creativity, simplicity, and precision are capable of transforming an entire industry. More than a century later, his inventions are still studied in engineering schools, and his name remains deeply respected by historians, engineers, and collectors all around the world. Very few people ever truly manage to change the course of history. John Moses Browning was, without the slightest doubt, one of them.